stay aware of that. Anybody heard of priming? Okay, so those of us who are old enough, you used to have a carburetor, okay, in your car. And anybody remember what you did before you started your car up? Pump the gas, usually twice. Why? Because it got the gas going, you primed the engine, so when you turn the key, it started right up, right? You don't do that anymore because the key, when you turn the key in new cars, it electronically does it. So the goal is to get something going. So priming is about helping it to get going, okay? This is an easy intervention to talk about. It's not easy to do for schools. That's what I want to say. It's not easy to do for. And the reason is it takes a little bit of effort to get the materials together. So the goal of priming is really it reduces anxiety, increases attention. Kids are more successful and more compliant if we can help prime them. And I'll give you some examples of this stuff. The goal is to introduce new material that they're not familiar with because they have anxiety around stuff. So something new or a change in something is difficult for them. So we can expose them to it. It makes it easier. And when I say kids, I apologize, adults too. I do work with some adults. The other goal is to expose them to things and give them some familiarity to it. So, and the other part of priming is done prior to whatever it is you want to teach or work on, okay? It's a lot of stuff. All right, so here's a couple important points about that. Is one, you start small. Use small parts. I'm going to walk you through a couple. Your reward attempts, we talked about positive things, so you can make any attempt to do whatever it is, positive feedback. Okay. So for example, one of the things in schools, the younger grades, they might do circle time, they might do some tasks and things like that. A new task for some kids is really difficult. Okay. So in order to help them have more positive behavior in that setting, which you can do, for example, the teacher's going to be having a book next week, whatever it might be, let's say Dr. Zeus's ABCs. It's new to them, so you send the book home a week prior to. Okay, this is just an example. You have the book around the house, okay? It might be sitting on the table, it might be there, Dad might sit in the chair and just read the book, right? What you're doing is you're just exposing the kid, an individual, to whatever it is. Just exposure. They don't have to read the book with you, they don't have to do any of that, okay? So eventually, you might invite the kid up to your lap, you read the book, you might show them a page, you might point to something. So and these moments can happen they can be super micro moments. I'm reading the book and I'd be like, hey John, did you see that? Oh, awesome. And that's it. That's all I'm going to do, right? So imagine doing that over a week, right? I have to do hundreds of those, okay? So, but the whole goal is for me to get the kid to look at it. And a good example about this is I had a kid in a school's self-contained classroom, and parent wanted him in the mainstream classroom, and so he would not go. Every time we tried to get him to go, he would punch and kick and spit people, right? So what I did is I arranged, this is hours and hours and hours and hours of work, so I arranged where when nobody was in the hallway at the school, we'd take a trip up and down the hallway, and I'd just point to his classroom. I said, that's your classroom. That's my classroom. I'm not going to, oh, you don't have to go there. And then we go right back to sleep, right? So I do that over and over and over again. And then, of course, classrooms, they have a window, right? And I said, that's your classroom. And he'd stop and he'd look, right? Now I planned to have the teacher have a desk in there with his name on it. So we could look in the window, and eventually I would say, that's your desk, right? So after months of work, months of doing this, eventually the teacher was in there. Everybody was out at recess, so I arranged where we could go look in the classroom. His teacher was there and waved to him, okay? And after another week or so, he would come in and say hi. Then he'd come sit at his desk. Then we do something fun at his desk. And then we do one spelling word at his desk, right? Now my whole goal is if I can get him in the classroom, I can do the rest of the stuff, okay? Because it needed to be around age-appropriate peers. But it took, from September to about January to do this, about 3-4 hours a day. So we finally got him in there. It was amazing. The first time he went by, spontaneously, he looks in there and he goes, hi class, and waved to everybody. And I was like, I think we're ready to try this, okay? So that's what kind of priming is. You can do that with books, you can do it with math, you can send home one assignment, You can read a page, you can point to a page. You're just introducing an individual to that. So, playground, right? So school comes in the fall, I have kids who go from middle school, from elementary to middle, or one school to the other. And most of the parents I work with are like, school's ending soon, we got to plan for summer. Because summer for individual kids that have kids with different challenges is not fun. It's 3 months with no structure, and you got to have them all day long. Okay, so it's really difficult for these families. So I plan for summer stuff, and then as August comes, I say, we've got to plan for school, and they're like, already, Brett? Yeah, yeah, we do. Because I know it's going to happen. I know it happens about after 2 to 3 weeks when you have IEP meeting. So my goal is to prevent behavior. So one of the things I do with kids, we go to the playground over the summer. Right? So if it's a new school, we'll drive by. Right? We'll drive by, I'll point, I'll say cool, we'll walk around it, they don't have to play on it. Okay, it takes a lot of work, but it's amazing. Once they start to be familiar with that, schools usually open up a couple weeks before school starts. You can work with the principal, you can visit the halls, you can visit the classroom, you can visit the teacher, you can get a picture of the teacher. That's what priming is. So I went on Chief Joe, because it's one of the schools I was working with last year. So I get on there and I'm like, great, they got pictures of staff. And I'm like, no, they don't. So if you can see it, so here it is, here's Mr. Ingalls, right? But there's no picture, okay? So that's a great, I was trying to figure out any public school. And I was trying to, there's so many of them, but I was trying to find, but that's a great way that you can prime for anybody. A new place, if you get a new job, who's gonna be there, all those kinds of things. Okay. Anybody heard of social stories? A lot of people have. So I also call them social narratives. Social stories is trademarked, so you can't use it unless you pay them lots of money. So anyway, so social stories, social narratives. So the whole goal is you have a story, okay? For adults or for teenagers, what you do is you write a script or a story about a real life example of something and how people might interact with that. Because the whole goal is if you read something, then they will know how to navigate through it. So it's kind of like when we read an article in the paper, you read a book, okay? For adults, you kind of make that, sometimes you just write up something about how you might handle getting a gift, or how you might handle a new boss, or how you might handle somebody telling you I don't like you, okay? So you have to modify some of the stuff. So here's a social story. Thomas Edison mistakes. This actually comes out of Carol Gray's stuff. And it says, Thomas Edison stayed calm so he could do his best thinking and learn from his mistakes. This is about mistakes, right? Because kids on the autism spectrum like to be perfect, do everything exact. Okay? So one of the things I have to teach them is it's okay to not be perfect, which is not easy to do. He helped invent the light bulb, the first motion picture. Okay? And I'll go down there. So for inventors, mistakes are an important part of their work. Right? Made over 700 mistakes. So I'm going to just skip through this a little bit. It's smart to know how to handle mistakes. Staying calm is important. A calm body helps the brain think and solve problems efficiently and effectively. In this case, efficiently and effectively means that the brain is working at its very best. Okay? Many students learn to stay calm when they make a mistake. This helps them think well, solve their problems efficiently and effectively. That way, like Thomas Edison, they can learn from their mistakes. Okay? That's kind of what a social story is. There are certain components and things you put in there. And I wanted to pull up a real, this is pretty language complex. You can have something very simple as, when you see a friend, you say hi. Your friend will say hi back. You wave to your friend, right? And it sounds so silly, but if you practice those social stories before an event, such as going on the playground, I might describe what nice hands are, how I'm going to share, how your friends will like it when you share, how they're going to want to play with you when they're sharing. So you just kind of create a story that's positive. It's about the kid, and they review it prior to events or situations. Okay? So the whole goal is they just read this. You read it over and over and over. How many of you, when you took a test, you studied right up to the test? Why? So you'd remember it, right? Same thing. You do the story right before you put them in a social situation. It increases the likelihood they're going to do it. Social stories are not easy to write, but if you get online, there's thousands of them. You just print it off, put your kid's name in there. Some people think it's got to be very specific in a certain way, and I've not found one way or the other works better. So this is pretty language intensive. You might use pictures. So here's another way, comic strips. And I meant to bring an example of this too. So which one of these is a thought bubble? Which one? This one? Okay, this one, right? It's a thought bubble, right? How do you know? Yeah, well, most of us have watched cartoons, right? Do you have a question? Oh, you just waving. Okay, which one is a speech bubble?
Top one on the other side.
Caption, right? And exclamation, right? We know that, right? Because we've read enough comics. So you can actually create a comic strip using these, and you can tell a story with them, okay? It's going to be hard to see, I apologize. So here, they're using thought bubbles. There's two kids up here, and they're using thought bubbles, or speech bubbles, and the bubbles are overlapping, and they talk about words bumping into each other, okay? So the words are bumping into each other. So it's very concrete, right? Because I imagine we're just going, right? So you can do that kind of thing. Here's another one. He's talking, and everything's going in everybody's ears. I've actually taken comic books, and I will white out the thought bubbles, okay? And I will create my own story. Okay, pretty easy to do. Hard part is whiteout doesn't dry very fast, so don't put your pages together. So
they actually have sticky notes in the shape of the little dialogue box.
They
It doesn't
do.
have the bubble, but it looks like a dialogue.
And you can, and I have some big ones that you can put on stuff. So you could take pictures of two people together and put some thought bubbles and speech bubbles. Because the whole goal of it is to teach them what we think certain things, we say certain things, and we do certain things. So you can use comic strips as a way to teach. I had a Ben 10 book, and I just went through and whited everything out. And then I thought, I'm tired of writing stuff out. Okay, so then I just started writing a social story in it. Right? It was a sticker book. We put stickers in it every week, but we had to read it to do the stickers. And it worked pretty okay. It talked about, because there was a Ben 10, and Ben 10, one of the guys was breaking stuff, and this kid would break things, and then he'd be like, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to break stuff. So it worked out pretty well. So here's the other part, is kids on autism spectrum love predictability. They like to know what's happening. So if you can share the agenda with them, it's really important. I can't tell you the number. I do some marriage work too. One spouse is always mad because the other one doesn't tell them what's going on, okay? Happens, okay? Kids on the autism spectrum, often they gotta know what's happening. Then if you change it, there's a problem, okay? And so one of the things you have to do is you really gotta create, you gotta share what's happening with them daily, weekly, whatever will support them. Some kids need to know hour by hour. Some kids just need to know the general schedule for the day. Most of us probably have a planner of some kind, okay? You know, and with iPhones and all this other stuff, you can actually share your calendar with your spouse. And this is funny, I had to go buy a dog, my wife reminded me to buy a dog food, so guess what she did? Put it on her calendar and then shared it with me so I would go buy dog food later today, okay? So I better not forget, right? So she shared her agenda. It was important to her, okay? And I forgot, so now I have to go do that. So, right? So I'll show you a couple examples. You can share it visually or verbally. Sometimes you can tell kids, hey, we're going to go to the store, and we're going to go to Target, we're going to go home and have dinner. It'll be that simple. Sometimes you got to write it down. You know how I wrote that stuff, okay? So here's an example of a visual schedule. I know you can't see it very well. Here's a morning routine. And it's brush your teeth, get dressed, breakfast, and going out. When there's after school in the evening. Chances are the school has one. Okay. Some visual schedules, you actually have to do each part. Put your pants on. Put your socks on, right? But here's the thing, it doesn't have to happen forever. One of the important parts is you teach the steps and you slowly fade out certain parts of it. So this is a good example of a visual schedule. Here's another one, and it's blurry, and I apologize to the kid who looked good. And what he did is he to cross off, he got to cross it off, and then on the sides, over here on both sides, are things he got to earn. So when he got certain amount of tokens, and I'll show you that, or when he got to the end of the line, he got to do a task, and he got to pick it off the board. Okay. It's kid was very verbal, highly verbal, very verbal kid, but he needed the support to know what was happening. Because if you didn't tell him what was happening, complete meltdown. Very aggressive kid, very, very aggressive kid. Here's another one. It's got some visual support. Okay. Right?